hello, film freaks. Welcome to this week's episode of Video Ferox, where apparently the entire theme of the month is Bruno Mattei rips off everybody else. Because tonight we're going to be taking a look at Strike Commando, an entirely batshit insane movie starring Reb Brown that does not rip off Rambo in any sort of way. So, grab your popcorn, settle back, and let's roll the trailer.
Major, this Ransom, is he really that good?
There's no one who can touch him in your whole damned army.
Shoot, you bastard! Shoot! It's a trap! Get out! Oh! Oh, no!
Watch out!
I break your back! Dirty sons of bitches! Shit!
Alrighty, welcome back from the trailer to Strike Commando by Bruno Mattei from, I think this was like 87, it was like late 80s, starring Reb Brown, who, okay, if you're a frequent visitor to the channel, you'll probably know his name. He was in Your Hunter from the Future, he was in Howling 2. Yeah, My Sister is a Werewolf, you gotta give the full title because... But honestly, everybody is going to know him from one place. The Mystery Science Theater 3000 episode of Space Mutiny.
Where he plays Dirk Hardpeck, which is a wonderful last name.
Anyway, Brad, did you like Strike Commando?
I did. However, I enjoyed it with some reservations. This is a really predictable movie. For one thing, it rips off the plot of Rambo, totally. But it also reminds me of a lot of other similar movies that involve American GIs in Vietnam somewhere and having to do a mission and becoming POWs. We've seen this sort of stuff in a lot of other films, some of which are decidedly better than this, some of which are worse than this. This one, nobody could act. The writing is poor. The execution is kind of laughable in places, but it was still fun.
When Bruno Mattei is on his game, he is fucking on his game. He's either feast or famine. And it's either, oh God, I have to slog through, cruel Jaws. Or it's going to be fucking awesome like this movie or Hell of the Living Dead or the ones where it's like, okay, it's still a terrible movie at the end of the day. But it's an entertaining as fuck movie.
This one, there's hardly any moments that are slow. And the action is all good and fast-paced and enjoyable. The setting is beautiful. It was filmed in the Philippines, I believe?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, the location they found for it is just gorgeous. And it's pretty believable as being Vietnam. So, I mean, they have some wonderful shots of these fields where they're farming rice and other things. And I mean, I was convinced that it was Vietnam, and then I was thinking about it and going, wait, this is Bruno Mattei. He probably fought in the Philippines.
If you go into this movie with your expectations kind of tailored and realizing that you're watching a fucking Bruno Mattei movie, then yes, you're going to love the fuck out of this. Shall we get on to the spoilers then?
We might as well.
All right, spoilers then. So the movie opens with this strike commando team, name, title drop, and they are infiltrating this Vietnamese camp of some sort, this installation, this fuel dump, I think.
There's a lot of Viet Cong running around and a couple of North Vietnamese National Army guys as well. They're easy to pick apart because the National Army guys are in uniform, whereas the VC are in black pajamas.
And the Russians hadn't shown up yet. They show up later in the movie. And you have this team of commandos led by Reb Brown, who is his name is like Sergeant Ransom, which is completely okay. The Mystery Science Theater gimmick of the blast McHard cheese and whatever.
Fridge, large meats.
Punt, speed chunk.
Butch, deadlift.
It actually applies to this movie. I mean, you can't get much more macho than Ransom as a last name.
Oh yeah, and the alliteration between it and Rambo is funny because it's a very similar sounding name.
That was Bruno Mattei's MO at this period in life because there was an extra on one of the other DVDs on Strike Commando 2 where they were interviewing Claudio Fragrasso and what was it like working with Bruno Mattei. And Claudio said that he would come into the writer's room, sit down, and just start showing out lines of like other movies and say, let's do that. And he would say, you know, Bruno, we can't do that. We can't like wholesale do the whole thing part and parcel. And Bruno's like, no, fuck it. Let's just do it, man. Let's just go. So yes, this movie is absolutely, completely aping Rambo.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, there they are. The commando team is going in and like planting explosives everywhere and occasionally running into guards and they have to kill them. What happens is that the guy who is the Charles Napier from Rambo II analog, he is gun shy. It's like, oh, we got to get this blown up now. Don't wait the whole 5 minutes. Push the button now. So they push the button prematurely and explosions start going off and the team's not away. And everybody else on the Strike Commando team is killed except for Reb Brown, who falls into this river and is washed downstream and presumably dead.
They do a really good credit sequence here where he's hidden by some vegetation that fell in the river with him, and he's been floating down with it. And while the beginning credits roll, they follow this leafy branch down the river, and it's really well done. And part of you is wondering why they're doing this, and then you realize right about where he washes up, you're like, oh, it's this guy. He got away.
Okay, we give Bruno Mattei an awful lot of stick on this show, but in this instance, he actually staged a pretty decent opening sequence. Now, a lot of the movie footage is stolen from RoboWar. So they took that footage and dropped that in here. But like the rest of the camp and like the infiltrating the camp and the everything up to that point, except for the stock footage, was actually pretty well done.
Some of the moments where the commandos are interacting are amusing. The bit where they're clipping their way through the fence and the Viet Cong with the spotlight sweeps past them and they're all like down on the ground and then they're back up clipping the fence, and when they're actually going through the fence, the guy with the spotlight swivels it back and catches them off guard, and they have to flatten themselves down really quick, and they're kind of muttering about this, going, that sort of thing was interesting and interactive with the characters. You got a good sense for them. Pity the fact most of them died after this point, but oh well. Also, some of the kills were entertaining.
Not really super gory, but it was your standard, okay, Reb Brown throws a knife and hits the guy in the chest and he falls over dead. That sort of kills.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of gunplay, but not a lot of like super violent squibs. Again, Bruno Mattei kind of, being reserved for an Italian filmmaker, I would expect a lot more violence and bloody, but that requires money, which this movie absolutely does not have any money.
I will have to admit, in terms of style and ramping things up, you really wouldn't want to do that sort of thing in the opening sequence. If you were going to do it, you'd want to save it for later in the movie.
The natives, they fish poor old Reb Brown out of the river, and they take him back to their hut, and they kind of nurse him back to health. And it cuts to much later, he wakes up, sits up straight up in bed, and sees these guys all wearing this weird white face.
Every single one of them screams at him. They have a monkey in there. The monkey screams. He pops out of a wall, falls. His feet are tied so that he's hanging by his feet, head down, right over a river, and all the other natives are screaming at him, saying, "American, American!" And he's looking around going, what the hell just happened?
And that's where the old French dude shows up, where he shows up and says, "Hey, Reb Brown, these guys think that you're here to kick all of the Charlie's asses and kick the Russians out of their village and make, secure the country for them." And he's all like, "Dude, I can't do this." I'm like, "No, I'm not gonna kill this guy that you've kidnapped and this enemy agent." They kidnap him, they bring him in, and they throw him down in front of Reb Brown. Had Reb Brown the gun and say, "Kill the dude," and he's like, "No, hell no, man, this is not right."
With the exception of the old French guy, everyone else looks really annoyed and disappointed, and they stop their chanting and they just kind of turn their backs on him and leave him to interact with the French dude.
Which I thought was a little bit weird, because usually in a movie like this, it's the white savior comes in to save the brown people and flex his manifest destiny. Here, Reb Brown's like, "No, that's not my manifest destiny. You're on your own, guys."
Mm-hmm. And it was kind of an interesting touch. The moment where he's being presented with this Viet Cong captive is just interesting. He's like, "You want me to do what? This guy's unarmed and subdued. I'm not doing this. This is against my moral code." And that was a very interesting scene, because it showed that he was somebody that wouldn't cross certain lines.
And so Reb Brown, he takes a whole bunch of the natives and says, "We'll get you to freedom. Okay, come with me. I'm the guy with the big gun, and we'll go protect you from the VC and get out of the jungle."
And when we can, we'll send a helicopter back to pick up everybody else.
So they're hiking through the jungle, and they're like, dodging VC, and there's a little bit of tension, whatnot. And then that's when they get jumped by Charlie. All these just like the Vietnamese, Viet Cong, just start showing him, and they start surrounding him, and that's where we start getting our second major action beat of the movie. So the poor French guy, he gets killed pretty quick.
He gets killed by the big Russian villain, who is this tremendous guy who has his head shaved, and he's just massive. He's got to be at least 6'5", and rippling with muscle, and he just strangles the poor French dude. But the French guy grabs the badge off of his collar and wraps his fist around it, so that when Ransom finds him, he can undo the guy's fist and finds the patch, which of course is a red star with a hammer and sickle on it.
Okay, we're dunking on how much this movie gets wrong. There was one little touch that I kind of liked when the old French dude gets killed, and Ransom comes and finds his body, and he's like, "Oh no, old French dude." Before he grabs him and flips over and checks and makes sure he's actually dead, he does that, kind of runs his hand along the ground to make sure there's no booby traps, because, Russians are infamous for taking a grenade, putting it under the dude, rolling the dude over, and so then when you roll the dude over back again, it goes off and gets you too. So, yeah, okay, Bruno Mattei, not exactly a master tactician of military science, but I liked that touch at least.
Also, another thing that they did that was fairly intelligent is when Ransom is fleeing the enemy camp with the Russian lady in tow, they go right by some oil drums, and he sets those on fire with a flamethrower and blocks off the passage that they are fleeing through. And I was like, that's a good idea. I mean, the guys that were chasing him, they had to go the long way around.
And so the villagers all get wiped out here, and Reb Brown says, "Oh shit, I better go check on like the village back home." And so he goes back to the village, and that's where the Russians, the evil, sinister, fuck you Russians, have slaughtered everybody. And that's
Except for the kid.
Except for the kid. Well, no, the kid dies. So there's this kid that when Reb first wakes up and it's like, oh, he sees Reb as this big savior and he has hero worship, and he's like, tell me about Disneyland. I want to know about Disneyland. And the second he said, I want to go to Disneyland with you, I'm like, he's dead. He's totally dead. And so yes, much like my prediction comes to pass, the kid dies and dies in his arms.
Yep. They have this dramatic moment where they're talking and the kid's like gasping out dialogue, but the kid does give him the name of Jakota, as well as, more evidence of what direction they disappeared in.
We should clarify your statement of dramatic scene, because it is nothing but cheese, just absolute. The kid's lying there. He's like, tell me about Disneyland, Savior, tell me about it. And Reb Brown's like, and it's this magical place where genies give you the cotton candy from trees, and you can climb the trees and just pluck it from the sky, and you will live there forever. And I'm just busting up, I'm laughing at this absolute just cheese, maximum cheese.
It is so schlocky and syrupy.
Unlike the guy from Rambo, who was just a CIA spook who was a dick, this guy is an actual sociopath.
He's also a traitor.
Yeah.
He's working for the Russians.
Evil traitor Radek, he sends off the helicopters to go pick up Reb Brown. And the Colonel Troutman analog of the piece, he goes along and he's in his own helicopter, and everybody else is along with him, and there's like 3 or 4 helicopters to go make up the pickup. And all of a sudden Radek is like, oh, hey, no, there's too much fire in the zone, we got to recall the troops, and so he pulls everybody back, except for the Colonel Troutman. He's like, no, fuck you, I'm going to go pick him up anyway, and so he goes and picks him up. And there's a little bit more gunfight, and they've got that scene where he's running across the rice paddies, and there's the explosions and shit like that. So it's another action beat. They pick him up, head back to the base, where it's like, dude, there's fucking Russians in the jungle. We need to go deal with the Russians. And so Radek's like, okay, fine. Go back and get the Russians then.
He gives them absolutely zero support. He doesn't have a squad. He gets rearmed and re-ammunitioned, and he's got a radio. That's about it. He doesn't get any air support. Nothing. Also, the intel's shaky. It's like he is totally setting Reb Brown up to get killed by either the VC or by the Russians. It doesn't really matter which at this point. And despite expectations from this officer who is a complete douche, Ransom actually finds the hidden Russian base, which has got 2 Russians and a whole bunch of VC, and he gets his ass captured.
Up to this point of the movie, it's actually been like pretty much just, foot on the accelerator, maximum speed, go. Once you get to the base and he gets captured, it slows down for a little bit. They start playing a little psychological torture games, and Jakota is like, puts him in a cell, and like there's the Tokyo Rose essentially for the Vietnamese. They find an American who is this wuss, and they put him on the radio and they make him broadcast propaganda to the troops in the South. So they take this milquetoast dude and throw him in the cell with them, and then he like is tortured to death and dies. But they leave him in the cell with like this dead body for probably a week or so. The ew factor eventually gets to him, and Jakota is all like, we must break him in his mind and in his body and in his spirit.
It's a really gross but also effective scene where Ransom is in a cell and he's covering up his mouth and going, because of the reek from the corpse that's been slowly decomposing. And
Slowly decomposing. Man, this is in the South Seas. You're going to have rapid decomposing in this hot, humid jungle climate.
this is a good point. The rapidly decomposing corpse, and he's trying to find a place in the cell that's as far away from it as he can, and he's failing miserably. And the fact that he also became friends with this guy is also, it really is tugging at your heartstrings. And you're like, man, this is worse than the electricity thing. You know, they put this guy through some real hellish tortures, and this is the worst.
They don't do the, okay, we're going to take a really big Bowie knife and stick it in some flame and then get it red hot and then cut your cheek like they did with Rambo. But they totally did the, okay, we're going to strap you to a old wireframe mattress box spring thing and then run some electrical current through it and zap you that way.
They also use a blowtorch on him. Ooh, that was kind of scary.
And they get him up to the point where it's like, okay, our old Berlin Betty is dead. You get to be our new Berlin Betty. They get him in front of the microphone and turn it on, and it's like, here's your script, read your script. And they got, Dakota with the blowtorch behind him, and Ransom is like, okay, I need to give you some bad news, Americans. We're getting our ass kicked, and that's why you must fight back! And then he starts grabbing people's guns and starts whooping ass there. And that sets up the end of the movie, the action beat for the rest of, he runs through the jungle with a big gun and the Russian female femme fatale in tow. And basically, that runs down the rest of the movie.
Basically, mows through all of the VC that were supporting the base, sometimes picking them off one at a time, sometimes mowing them down in group lots.
How the hell he managed to put together a pretty decent ghillie suit, with all the leaves and twigs and whatnot sticking out. He did this in the few seconds in between he killed this VC and that VC.
Well, it gets even better. There's one point where he's got a man trap set up, one of the spring-loaded types.
Yeah,
with
the punchy
spikes,
head things or whatever. Yeah, the spike ball or
the spike platform. And I'm like, how the hell did he set that up in that little amount of time? I mean, the only logical conclusion is that he found one that somebody else had made, but I don't think that's very plausible at all.
So yeah, we can kind of dunk on the story and the very simplistic script. And to be fair, it is 100% very simplistic and basic. Ransom gets captured, he escapes, he goes back into the shit, he then kills a whole bunch of Germans, VC, whatever, Nazis, ninja, whatever. And then roll the end credits. I mean, it's a very simple ABC beat plot. But you can be basic and still be entertaining, and it was able to do that.
Mm-hmm. There's also an ending sequence which takes place, like, how many years later?
It's like 15 or so years. Well, so what happens was he gets back to the base after whooping Dakota's ass. Dakota's ass. That's not, damn it. So he whoops Dakota, gets back to civilization, and by that point, the Charles Napier analog has split because, oh shit, here comes Ransom, and now he knows that I'm a traitor. So he can't get his satisfaction there. We jump to the fall of Saigon, so probably another year or two, or whatever. I don't know my Vietnam history very well. You cut to that. He hooks up with the Colonel Troutman and says, hey man, I can't find Napier. What the hell's going on? I was like, oh no, he flew back to the States. Jump to another 15 years later where it's like Manila, I think, or something.
Yeah, it is Manila. And I think he set himself up in like an embassy or something. I'm not entirely sure. But Ransom goes in there and does basically a strike raid and kills everybody in the building and blows up his nemesis. Just, he doesn't even bother shooting them. No, he takes the time, standing outside the dude's door, to plug the grenade launcher on the bottom of assault rifle, load it with a grenade, and shoot the grenade through the door.
In the biggest explosion, that was the most powerful grenade I have ever seen in my life, because the whole side of the building just kaboom blows out.
And then after he leaves the building, which really isn't much of a building anymore, he runs into his good friend Dakota, who they have a final confrontation, which is kind of amusing.
What happens is, after they have a little bit of fist fight and there's some blood and whatnot, that Ransom, he gets a grenade and stuffs it literally into Dakota's mouth and pulls the pin. And okay, this is how goofy as fuck this movie is, because he blows up and it's just these two legs standing there, these two dummy legs. And then you hear the voiceover in the Dakota's, very fake Boris Badenov accent, "I'll get you, Amerikanski," as he flies away. And then the teeth land next to him because he's got this, the Jaws look going on from Moonraker. And he's all like, that Russian dentist, they make their shit good, and then roll the credits. And it's like, what the fuck ending is that?
And there's finally a little voiceover where he says that similarity to any characters formerly established in other films is completely coincidental, which just had me going. I thought that was the funniest thing in the whole movie.
All right, well, I guess that's everything for Strike Commando, so we're just going to catch you next week then, aren't we?
Was Verdania.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Meet your drive-in theater potato expert. He selects only the most magnificent potatoes. Then he turns them into crisp, golden, perfect French fries. Just look at those beauties. Tender and delicious on the inside, golden and crisp on the outside. Wouldn't a heaping helping of them taste good? Sizzling hot and delicious French fries. Ready and waiting for you right this minute at your refreshment center. Better buy plenty.
Well, thank you for joining us on this madcap journey of red brownness. Next week, we're going to continue the motif of large men with very big guns, because me and Ian, we're going to be taking a look at Red Mob. So come back, join us for that. Drop us an email. thevideonastyproject@gmail.com is the address. And please, until Daka, it's stay evil time.
Bonjour.